dog witnesses a crime and acts in a way that will amaze you. In the small town of Maplewood, where the streets were lined with oak trees and the scent of fresh baked bread wafted from the local bakery, life moved at a gentle pace. Children played in the parks, neighbors exchanged friendly waves, and the sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink as it set behind the hills. Among the residents was a 10-year-old boy named Ethan, whose world revolved around adventure, imagination, and his loyal companion, a golden retriever named Max. Ethan was a curious child, always exploring the woods behind his house, where he and Max would embark on countless quests. They were inseparable, sharing a bond that transcended words. Max, with his warm brown eyes and boundless energy, was more than just a pet. He was Ethan's confidant, protector, and best friend. Together, they created a universe filled with dragons, treasure hunts, and heroic rescues, where every day was a new chapter in their story. But beneath the idyllic surface of Maplewood, shadows lurked. The town had its secrets, and one of them was about to surface in a way that would change Ethan's life forever. One crisp autumn afternoon, as leaves danced in the wind, Ethan and Max ventured deeper into the woods than ever before. The air was filled with the earthy scent of damp soil and decaying leaves, and the sound of rustling branches echoed around them. Ethan felt a thrill of excitement. They were explorers in an uncharted territory. "Come on, Max, let's see what's over that hill," Ethan called, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm. Max barked in agreement, his tail wagging furiously as he bounded ahead. As they crested the hill, Ethan's heart raced. Below them lay a clearing, and in the center stood an old, abandoned cabin, its wooden walls weathered and covered in vines. Ethan's imagination ignited. "What if it's a pirate's hideout?" he whispered to Max, who tilted his head, as if pondering the possibility. They approached the cabin cautiously, the crunch of leaves underfoot breaking the serene silence. Ethan peered through a cracked window, his breath fogging the glass. Inside, the cabin was dark and dusty, filled with remnants of a forgotten past. Suddenly, a noise startled him, a low growl emanating from the shadows. Ethan's heart raced as he stepped back, but Max stood firm, his body tense and alert. "What was that, boy?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. Max barked, a deep, protective sound that echoed through the clearing. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, disheveled and wild-eyed, clutching something tightly in his hands. Ethan's stomach dropped as he realized the man was not alone. Two other figures lurked behind him, their faces obscured by hoods. They were talking in hushed tones, their voices low and menacing. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He knew they were up to no good. "We should go, Max," he whispered, but Max remained rooted to the spot, his gaze fixed on the intruders. Ethan felt a surge of fear but also a flicker of bravery. He couldn't just turn away, he had to do something. Suddenly, the man shouted, "We need to move. The cops are coming." Panic surged through Ethan as he realized they were planning something dangerous. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911, whispering urgently into the receiver. "There are men in the woods, they're doing something bad. Please help." As he hung up, the men turned, their eyes narrowing as they spotted Ethan and Max. "Hey, you!" one of them shouted, and they began to advance toward the boy. Ethan's heart raced as he backed away, but Max stepped forward, barking fiercely, ready to protect his friend. "Stay back," Ethan shouted, his voice trembling but determined. The men hesitated, momentarily taken aback by Max's fierce loyalty. In that moment, Ethan felt a surge of courage. He knew he had to protect Max and himself. "Run, Max," he yelled, and together they turned to flee. the sound of their footsteps echoing in the stillness of the woods. The men shouted behind them, but Ethan didn't look back. He could feel Max's presence beside him, a steady force of bravery that pushed him forward. They raced through the trees, branches scratching at their arms and legs. But Ethan didn't care. All that mattered was getting away. As they burst into the clearing, Ethan spotted a path leading back to town. "This way, Max," he called, and they sprinted toward safety. As they reached the edge of the woods, Ethan glanced back, his heart pounding. The men were nowhere in sight, but he knew they wouldn't give up easily. They had to warn the town, to make sure no one else got hurt. "Come on, Max. We have to find Mom," Ethan urged, and they raced down the street. The familiar sights of Maplewood rushing past them. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows on the pavement. But Ethan felt a sense of urgency that propelled him forward. Finally, they reached their home. A cozy little house with a white picket fence and a garden bursting with flowers. Ethan burst through the door, breathless and wide-eyed. "Mom! Mom!" he shouted, searching for her in the living room. His mother, Sarah, looked up from her book, concern etched on her face. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she asked, rushing to him. "There are men in the woods. They're doing something bad. We have to call the police," Ethan exclaimed, his voice trembling with fear. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "What do you mean? Are you sure?" she asked, kneeling down to look him in the eyes. "Yes, I saw them. They were talking about the cops coming. We have to hurry," Ethan insisted, glancing at Max, who stood protectively by his side. Sensing the tension in the room. Okay, let's call the police," Sarah said, her voice steady as she reached for her phone. Ethan watched anxiously as she dialed, his heart racing. He could still feel the adrenaline coursing through him, the fear of what they had witnessed. As Sarah spoke to the dispatcher, Ethan felt a mix of emotions, fear, worry, and a strange sense of pride. He had faced danger, and Max had been right there with him. A steadfast companion in the face of uncertainty. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah hung up the phone. "The police are on their way, Ethan. You did the right thing," she said, pulling him into a comforting embrace. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him, but the fear still lingered. "Max was so brave, Mom. He wouldn't let them get to us," Ethan said, looking down at his loyal friend, who wagged his tail as if to say, "I'll always protect you." As they waited for the police, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The bond between him and Max had been tested, and he knew they would face whatever came next together. Little did he know, the adventure was far from over, and the true test of their bravery was yet to come. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over Maplewood as Ethan and his mother waited anxiously for the police to arrive. Max lay at Ethan's feet, his golden fur shimmering in the fading light. A comforting presence amidst the tension that filled the room. Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of the men in the woods. Who were they? What were they planning? He felt a mix of fear and determination, knowing that he had to do something more than just wait. "Ethan, why don't you tell me exactly what happened?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but firm. She sat down beside him, her eyes searching his face for answers. Ethan took a deep breath, recalling every detail. "We were exploring the woods, and we found this old cabin. There were 3 men inside, and they were talking about something bad. They looked really scary, Mom. I think they were planning to do something illegal. When they saw us, I got scared, but Max barked and stood in front of me. He was so brave." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "You did the right thing by calling the police, Ethan. It's important to let them handle it. But we need to stay safe, okay? Promise me you won't go back to the woods alone." "I promise, Mom," Ethan replied, though a part of him felt restless. He wanted to help, to do something more than just wait. He glanced at Max, who seemed to sense his unease. "Maybe we could go back with the police. They might need us to show them where the cabin is." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of sirens pierced the evening air, growing louder as they approached. Ethan's heart raced with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The police were here. He felt a surge of hope that they would catch the men and keep everyone safe. A moment later, 2 police cars pulled up in front of their house. Lights flashing but sirens silent. Officers stepped out, their expressions serious but approachable. One officer, a tall woman with short brown hair and a kind smile, approached them first. "Good evening. I'm Officer Daniels. I understand you called about some suspicious activity in the woods," she said, kneeling down to Ethan's level. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his stomach. "I saw 3 men in an old cabin. They were talking about something bad, and I think they might be up to no good. Can you tell me exactly what you saw?" Officer Daniels asked, her tone encouraging. Ethan recounted the events, his words tumbling out in a rush. "They were talking about the cops coming, and they looked really scary. Max and I were just exploring, and when they saw us, we ran away. I called you guys right after." "Good thinking, Ethan. You did the right thing," Officer Daniels said, giving him an approving nod. "Can you show us where the cabin is?" Ethan's heart raced with excitement. "Yes, I can show you." He turned to Max, who seemed to sense the urgency in the air. "Come on, boy, let's go." As they stepped outside, Ethan felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. The night air was cool against his skin, and the stars twinkled overhead. A stark contrast to the darkness that loomed in the woods. Officer Daniels led the way, followed by another officer, a burly man named Officer Ramirez, who kept a watchful eye on their surroundings. Ethan walked quickly, his heart pounding as they approached the edge of the woods. Max trotted beside him, his tail wagging, ready for whatever lay ahead. The familiar path felt different now, charged with a sense of purpose. "Stay close to me, Ethan," Officer Daniels instructed as they entered the woods. "And keep Max close, too. We don't know what we might find." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the trees for any sign of the men. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, and every rustle of leaves made him jump. But he pushed through the fear, focusing on the mission ahead. As they reached the clearing, Ethan pointed toward the cabin. "It's right there," he exclaimed, his voice barely above a whisper. The cabin loomed before them, dark and foreboding, its windows like empty eyes watching their approach. Officer Daniels signaled for the other officers to spread out, and they moved cautiously toward the cabin. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline as he followed closely behind, Max at his side, ready to protect him. "Stay here, Ethan," Officer Daniels instructed, her voice firm but gentle. "We're going to check it out. If you see or hear anything, let us know." Ethan nodded, his heart racing as he watched the officers approach the cabin. They moved silently, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Ethan held his breath, anxiety gripping him as he waited for them to return. Moments felt like hours as the officers searched the cabin. Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of what could be happening inside. Were the men still there? Were they armed? He glanced at Max, who stood alert, sensing the tension in the air. Suddenly, a shout broke the silence. "Clear!" Officer Ramirez called out, stepping back from the cabin. "No one's here." Ethan's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "They were just here," he exclaimed, frustration bubbling to the surface. "They must have left in a hurry," Officer Daniels said, her brow furrowed. "But we'll keep looking. Can you show us where you saw them? Ethan nodded, leading the way deeper into the woods. As they walked, he felt a sense of responsibility weighing on his shoulders. He had seen something dangerous, and now it was up to him to help the police find the men before they could hurt anyone else. They reached a spot near the cabin where Ethan had first spotted the men. They were right here, he said, pointing to the ground. I swear they were talking about something bad. Officer Daniels knelt down, examining the area. You did a great job, Ethan. We'll take it from here. If you see anything else, don't hesitate to call us again. Ethan felt a mix of pride and worry. What if they come back? What if they try to hurt someone? He asked, his voice trembling. We'll be on high alert, Officer Ramirez assured him. And we'll have extra patrols in the area. You did the right thing by telling us. You're very brave. As they made their way back to the clearing, Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of the men. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, lurking in the shadows. He glanced at Max, who seemed to sense his unease. We have to keep everyone safe, Max, he whispered, determination flooding his heart. Back at the cabin, Officer Daniels spoke into her radio, requesting additional units to patrol the area. Ethan listened intently, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. He had never been involved in something like this before, and the weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. As the officers continued their investigation, Ethan felt a sense of urgency growing within him. He couldn't just stand by and wait for the police to handle everything. He had to do something more. Mom, he called out, spotting Sarah standing a few feet away, her expression a mix of worry and pride. Can we help? I want to make sure everyone is safe. Sarah knelt down beside him, her eyes softening. Ethan, I know you want to help, but it's important to let the police do their job. You've already done so much by telling them what you saw. But what if they come back? What if they hurt someone? Ethan insisted, his voice rising with urgency. I understand, sweetheart. But we need to trust the police. They're trained for this, Sarah replied gently, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Ethan felt torn. He wanted to trust the officers, but the fear of the unknown gnawed at him. He glanced at Max, who seemed to sense his turmoil. What do you think, boy? He asked, looking into Max's warm brown eyes. Max wagged his tail, as if encouraging Ethan to follow his instincts. In that moment, Ethan realized that he couldn't just wait. He had to take action, even if it meant stepping outside the lines. Mom, I have an idea, Ethan said, determination flooding his voice. What if we set up a lookout? We could watch for the men and make sure they don't come back. Sarah hesitated, glancing at the officers who were still busy with their investigation. Ethan, I don't know if that's a good idea. It could be dangerous, but if we don't do anything, they might hurt someone. We can't just sit here. Ethan pleaded, his heart racing with urgency. After a moment of contemplation, Sarah sighed. Okay, but we need to be careful. We'll stay close to the house, and we'll keep Max with us. He can help us if anything happens. Ethan's heart soared with excitement. Thank you, Mom. We'll keep everyone safe. He turned to Max, who barked in agreement, ready for the adventure ahead. As they made their way back toward their house, Ethan felt a sense of purpose. He was determined to protect his town, his friends, and his family. With Max by his side, he felt invincible. Once they reached home, Ethan and Sarah set up a lookout from their front porch, where they could see the street and the edge of the woods. They brought out a couple of chairs and settled in, Max lying at their feet, alert and watchful. Okay, we'll take turns watching, Sarah said, her voice steady. I'll go first, and you can keep an eye out after me. Ethan nodded, his heart racing with anticipation. He scanned the trees, searching for any sign of movement. The night was quiet, the only sounds being the rustling leaves and the distant chirping of crickets. But Ethan's mind was racing, filled with thoughts of the men and what they might be planning. As the minutes ticked by, Ethan felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He wanted to be brave, to protect his town, but the fear of the unknown loomed over him. He glanced at Max, who seemed to sense his unease. "We'll figure this out, buddy," he whispered, scratching behind Max's ears. After a while, Sarah stood up, stretching her arms. "Okay, Ethan, it's your turn to watch. I'll go inside and grab us some snacks. We'll need our energy." Ethan nodded, his eyes glued to the edge of the woods. "Be careful, Mom," he said, his voice filled with concern. "I will, I promise," she replied, giving him a reassuring smile before heading inside. As Ethan settled into the chair, he felt a surge of determination. He was going to protect his town, no matter what. He scanned the trees, his heart racing with anticipation. Every rustle of leaves made him jump, but he pushed through the fear, focusing on the task at hand. Minutes turned into what felt like hours as he watched the darkness, his mind racing with thoughts of the men. What were they planning? Were they still out there? He felt a sense of responsibility weighing on him, knowing that he had to keep everyone safe. Suddenly, Max perked up, his ears twitching as he sniffed the air. Ethan's heart raced as he leaned forward, straining to hear. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, his pulse quickening. Max stood up, his body tense, and began to growl softly. Ethan's heart raced as he followed Max's gaze toward the edge of the woods. "Do you see something?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping cautiously into the clearing. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the man from the cabin, the wild-eyed figure who had threatened them earlier. Panic surged through him, and he instinctively reached for Max, who stood protectively in front of him, barking fiercely. "Mom!" Ethan shouted, his voice filled with fear. "The man is back!" Sarah rushed out of the house, her eyes wide with alarm. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Stay back!" Ethan yelled, his heart pounding as he faced the intruder. The man paused, his eyes darting between Ethan and Sarah. A look of desperation etched on his face. "Please, I'm not here to hurt anyone," the man shouted, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I just need help." Ethan's heart raced as he exchanged glances with his mother. "What do you want?" Sarah asked, her voice firm but cautious. I got lost in the woods. I didn't mean to scare you. I just need to find my way back," the man stammered, his voice trembling. Ethan felt a mix of fear and confusion. Could he trust this man? He glanced at Max, who remained tense, ready to protect him. "You were with those other guys. What do you want?" Ethan demanded, his voice shaking. "I swear, I'm not with them. I was just passing through, and I got caught up in something I didn't understand. Please, I just want to go home," the man pleaded, desperation in his eyes. Ethan's heart raced as he weighed his options. He wanted to believe the man, but the fear of what he had witnessed loomed large. "Mom, what should we do?" he asked, his voice trembling. Sarah took a step forward, her expression serious. "We need to call the police, Ethan. We can't take any chances." Before Ethan could respond, the man's expression shifted from desperation to panic. "No, please don't call them. I'll get in trouble. I just want to go home," he pleaded, his voice rising in urgency. Ethan felt torn. He wanted to help, but he also felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "What if you're lying?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I'm not. I promise. I just got caught up in something bad, and I want to get out of here," the man insisted, his eyes pleading. Just then, The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. Ethan's heart raced as he realized the police were coming. "Mom, we have to decide now," he urged, glancing between the man and his mother. "Ethan, we can't trust him. We need to protect ourselves," Sarah said firmly, her voice steady. The man's eyes widened in fear as he heard the sirens. "Please, you have to help me. I didn't mean to get involved in anything bad," he shouted, desperation flooding his voice. Ethan felt a surge of empathy for the man, but the fear of the unknown loomed large. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Stay back," Sarah shouted, stepping protectively in front of Ethan. "We're calling the police." As the sirens grew closer, the man's expression shifted from desperation to panic. "No, please don't. I'll do anything. Just help me," he pleaded, his voice rising in urgency. Ethan's heart raced as he watched the man's fear unfold. He felt a mix of compassion and fear, torn between wanting to help and the instinct to protect himself and his mother. Just then, the police cars pulled up, lights flashing as officers stepped out, ready to assess the situation. Officer Daniels approached, her expression serious as she took in the scene. "What's going on here?" she asked, her eyes scanning the area. "This man was in the woods. He said he got lost, but I don't know if we can trust him," Ethan exclaimed, his voice trembling. Officer Daniels stepped forward, her demeanor calm but authoritative. "Sir, I need you to step back and keep your hands where I can see them," she instructed, her voice steady. The man raised his hands, his eyes wide with fear. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need help," he pleaded, desperation flooding his voice. "Ethan, stay close to me," Sarah said, her voice steady as she moved to stand beside her son. Officer Daniels approached the man cautiously, her eyes narrowed. "What's your name?" she asked, her tone firm. "Jake. I swear, I'm not with those guys. I just got lost," he insisted, his voice trembling. "Where did you come from?" Officer Daniels pressed, her gaze unwavering. "I was just passing through the woods. I didn't mean to get caught up in anything. Please, I just want to go home," Jake pleaded, his eyes darting between the officers and Ethan. Ethan felt a surge of empathy for the man, but the fear of the unknown loomed large. He glanced at Max, who stood protectively beside him, sensing the tension in the air. "Mom, what should we do?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "We need to let the police handle this, Ethan. They'll figure out what's going on," Sarah replied, her voice steady. As the officers continued to question Jake, Ethan felt a mix of emotions swirling within him. He wanted to help, but he also felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He glanced at Max, who remained alert, ready to protect him. After a few tense moments, Officer Daniels turned to Ethan and Sarah. "We're going to take this man into custody for questioning. We need to make sure he's not involved in anything illegal," she said, her tone firm. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "I just wanted to keep everyone safe. You did the right thing, Ethan." "You're very brave," Officer Daniels replied, giving him an approving nod. As the officers led Jake away, Ethan felt a mix of emotions swirling within him. He had faced danger, and he had done everything he could to protect his town. With Max by his side, he felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. As the night wore on, Ethan and Sarah returned to their home, the weight of the evening's events settling over them. They sat on the porch, Max lying at their feet, a comforting presence amidst the uncertainty. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think we did everything we could, Ethan. You were brave, and you helped keep our town safe," Sarah replied, her voice steady. Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. He had faced danger, and he had done everything he could to protect his family and his town. With Max by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they sat in the quiet of the night, Ethan felt a sense of hope. He knew that he and Max would always be there for each other, ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they were a team, and nothing could break the bond they shared. The following days in Maplewood were filled with a tense anticipation. The police had increased patrols in the area, and Ethan felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The man they had encountered, Jake, had been taken in for questioning. But the fear of the unknown still loomed over the town. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't over yet. Ethan and Max resumed their daily routines, but the woods felt different now. What had once been a place of adventure and imagination now felt like a shadowy realm filled with uncertainty. Ethan often found himself glancing toward the trees, half expecting to see the men from the cabin lurking in the shadows. One afternoon, as Ethan and Max played in the backyard, he noticed a group of kids gathered at the edge of the woods. They were whispering and pointing, their eyes wide with excitement. Curiosity piqued, Ethan approached them, Max trotting at his side. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, trying to peer over the heads of the other kids. "There's a rumor going around that the men from the cabin are back," one of the kids exclaimed, his voice filled with a mix of fear and thrill. Ethan's heart raced. "What do you mean? How do you know?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I heard my dad talking to the police. They think the guys might be hiding out in the woods again," the boy replied, his eyes wide with excitement. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. He couldn't just stand by and let the men threaten his town again. "We have to tell the police," he exclaimed, glancing at Max, who seemed to sense his urgency. "Yeah, but what if they see us?" another kid said, fear creeping into his voice. "We can't just do nothing," Ethan insisted, determination flooding his heart. "We have to warn everyone." As the other kids hesitated, Ethan felt a wave of responsibility wash over him. He had faced danger before, and he couldn't let fear hold him back now. "Come on, Max. We have to go," he shouted, turning toward the woods. Max barked in agreement, his tail wagging as he followed Ethan's lead. The other kids exchanged nervous glances, but Ethan's determination was infectious. One by one, they began to follow him, their excitement mingling with fear. As they approached the edge of the woods, Ethan felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. He glanced back at the group of kids, who were now huddled together, their expressions a mix of fear and excitement. "Stay close, everyone," Ethan instructed, his voice steady. "We need to be careful." They entered the woods, the familiar path now feeling ominous. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Ethan's heart raced as he led the way, Max at his side, ever watchful. As they ventured deeper into the woods, Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of the men. What if they were still out there? What if they were planning something dangerous? He felt a surge of determination. He had to protect his friends and his town. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the silence, and Ethan froze. The group behind him fell silent, their eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" one of the kids whispered, glancing nervously around. "I don't know," Ethan replied, his heart pounding. "But we need to keep moving." They pressed on, the tension in the air palpable. Ethan's senses were heightened, every sound amplified in the stillness of the woods. He could feel Max's presence beside him, a steady force of loyalty and courage. As they reached a clearing, Ethan spotted something out of the corner of his eye, a flash of movement among the trees. His heart raced as he turned to look, and there, standing just beyond the tree line, were the three men from the cabin. "Run!" Ethan shouted, panic surging through him. The kids screamed and turned to flee, but Ethan felt rooted to the spot, his heart pounding in his chest. Max barked fiercely, standing protectively in front of Ethan, ready to defend him. "Stay back," one of the men shouted, stepping forward. "We're not here to hurt anyone." Ethan's mind raced. He remembered the fear in Jake's eyes, the desperation in his voice. But these men were different. They looked wild and dangerous, their faces twisted with anger and frustration. "Get away from us," Ethan yelled, his voice trembling but resolute. He felt a surge of bravery, knowing he had to protect his friends. "Listen, kid. We just want to talk," one of the men shouted, his voice harsh. "We're not the bad guys here." Ethan's heart raced as he glanced back at the other kids, who were huddled together, fear etched on their faces. "We're calling the police," he shouted, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Go ahead. They won't believe you," the man sneered, taking a step closer. "We're just trying to survive out here." Ethan felt a surge of anger. "You're lying. You were in that cabin. You were planning something bad," he shouted, his voice rising. "Enough," the man barked, his expression darkening. "You don't know what you're talking about." In that moment, Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline. He couldn't let fear control him. "Max, stay close," he commanded, and the dog stood firm, ready to protect his friend. "Get out of here, kid. You don't want to get involved," another man shouted, his voice filled with menace. Ethan's heart raced as he realized they were trying to intimidate him. He took a step back, but Max stood his ground, barking fiercely. "We're not afraid of you," Ethan shouted, his voice trembling but defiant. Suddenly, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. The men exchanged nervous glances, their expressions shifting from anger to fear. "We need to go," one of them shouted, turning to flee into the woods. "Stop," Ethan yelled, but it was too late. The men disappeared into the trees, leaving Ethan and the other kids standing in stunned silence. The police arrived moments later, their lights flashing as they pulled into the clearing. Officer Daniels stepped out, her expression serious as she assessed the situation. "What happened here?" she asked, her eyes scanning the group. "They were here. The men from the cabin," Ethan exclaimed, his voice filled with urgency. "They were trying to scare us." Officer Daniels nodded, her expression firm. "Did you see which way they went?" "They ran into the woods," Ethan replied, pointing in the direction the men had fled. "We have to catch them. Stay here," Officer Daniels instructed, signaling to her fellow officers. "We'll search the area." As the officers moved into the woods, Ethan felt a mix of fear and determination. He had faced danger, and he couldn't let the men threaten his town again. He glanced at Max, who stood beside him, ready to protect him. "Are you okay, Ethan?" Sarah asked, rushing to his side, her expression filled with concern. "I'm fine, Mom, but we have to help," Ethan insisted, his heart racing with urgency. "Let the police handle it." "Ethan, you did the right thing by coming here," Sarah replied, her voice steady. Ethan nodded, but the fear of the unknown gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't over yet. As the officers searched the woods, Ethan felt a surge of determination. He had to protect his friends and his town, no matter what. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the woods. The officers emerged, their expressions serious as they apprehended one of the men. "We got one," Officer Ramirez shouted, dragging the man toward the police car. Ethan's heart raced as he watched the scene unfold. "What about the others?" he asked, his voice trembling. "We'll find them," Officer Daniels assured him, her tone firm. "You did a great job, Ethan. You helped us catch one of them," as the officers secured the man in the back of the police car. Ethan felt a mix of relief and anxiety. They had caught one of the men, but what about the others? He glanced at Max, who stood beside him, a steady presence amidst the chaos. "Thank you for your help, Ethan," Officer Daniels said, kneeling down to his level. "You were very brave today." Ethan felt a surge of pride. "I just wanted to keep everyone safe," he replied, his voice steady. "You did just that," Officer Daniels said, giving him an approving nod. "We'll make sure the rest of the men are caught. You can go home now." As the officers continued their investigation, Ethan felt a sense of hope. They had faced danger together, and he had done everything he could to protect his town. With Max by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they walked home, Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment. He had faced his fears, and he had helped keep his town safe. With Max by his side, he knew they could face anything together. The sun began to set over Maplewood, casting a warm golden hue across the town as Ethan and his mother walked home from the scene of the confrontation. The air was filled with the comforting sounds of evening, children laughing, the distant hum of cicadas, and the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. But for Ethan, the day's events weighed heavily on his mind. As they approached their house, Ethan felt a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. They had caught one of the men, but what about the others? Would they come back? He glanced at Max, who trotted beside him, his tail wagging as if to reassure Ethan that everything would be okay. "Mom, do you think they'll come back?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah paused, looking down at her son with a thoughtful expression. "I don't know, Ethan. The police are doing everything they can to keep the town safe. They'll increase patrols and make sure that everyone is protected." Ethan nodded, but the unease in his stomach remained. He had faced danger, and while he felt proud of what he had done, he couldn't shake the feeling that the threat was still out there. "What if they're still hiding in the woods?" he pressed. "Then the police will find them," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "You did a brave thing today, Ethan. You helped catch one of them, and that's important." As they entered their home, Ethan felt a wave of comfort wash over him. The familiar sights and sounds of his house, the smell of dinner cooking, the warmth of the living room, wrapped around him like a cozy blanket. But even in this safe space, his mind raced with thoughts of the men and what they might do next. "Why don't you go wash up for dinner?" Sarah suggested, sensing his restlessness. "I'll call your dad and let him know what happened." Ethan nodded, grateful for the distraction. He headed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face, trying to shake off the tension that clung to him. As he looked in the mirror, he saw a boy who had faced something terrifying. But he also saw a glimmer of bravery in his eyes. He had stood up for himself and his friends, and that was something to be proud of. After washing up, Ethan joined his mother in the kitchen, where the comforting aroma of spaghetti filled the air. His father, Mark, was already home, sitting at the table with a concerned expression. "Hey, buddy," Mark said, looking up as Ethan entered. "I heard about what happened today. Are you okay?" Ethan nodded, but the weight of the day's events hung heavily on his shoulders. "I'm fine, Dad. But there were 3 men in the woods, and they were really scary. We saw them, and they tried to intimidate us." Mark's expression shifted to one of concern. "What do you mean? Did they threaten you?" "Not exactly," Ethan replied, his voice steadying as he recounted the events. "But they were trying to scare us. They said they weren't the bad guys, but I don't believe them. They ran away when the police came." Mark exchanged a glance with Sarah, who nodded, her expression serious. "You did the right thing by telling the police, Ethan. It's important to keep everyone safe," Mark said, his voice filled with pride. Ethan felt a swell of warmth at his father's words. "I just wanted to help," he said, his voice earnest. "I didn't want them to hurt anyone." As they sat down to dinner, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. But Ethan's mind kept drifting back to the woods. He couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't over yet. After dinner, he helped his parents clean up, but his thoughts were elsewhere. "Can I take Max for a walk?" Ethan asked, glancing at his mother. "I want to check the woods again." Sarah hesitated, concern flickering in her eyes. "Ethan, I don't think that's a good idea. The police are still searching the area, and it might not be safe." "I know, but I just want to make sure everything is okay," Ethan insisted, determination flooding his voice. "Max can help me. He'll keep me safe." Mark exchanged a glance with Sarah, and after a moment, Sarah sighed. "Okay, but you have to stay close to the house. And take your phone with you. Call us if you see anything unusual." Ethan's heart raced with excitement and apprehension. "I will, I promise." He grabbed Max's leash and clipped it onto his collar, feeling a surge of confidence. With Max by his side, he felt ready to face anything. As they stepped outside, the cool evening air wrapped around them, and the sky was painted with hues of purple and orange. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly. He and Max walked toward the edge of the woods, the familiar path now tinged with a sense of purpose. "Okay, boy, let's see what we can find," Ethan said, his voice steady as they entered the trees. The woods felt different now, the shadows deeper and the sounds more pronounced. Every rustle of leaves made him jump, but he pushed through the fear, focusing on the task at hand. As they ventured deeper into the woods, Ethan felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He scanned the area, looking for any signs of the men. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. Max trotted beside him, his nose to the ground, sniffing for any unusual scents. "Stay close, Max," Ethan whispered, his heart racing. He felt a surge of determination. He had to protect his town, his friends, and his family. Suddenly, Max stopped, his ears perked up, and he began to growl softly. Ethan's heart raced as he leaned down to look at his dog. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Max sniffed the air, his body tense as he scanned the surroundings. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline. "Come on, let's check it out," he urged, moving cautiously forward. They approached a small clearing, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. There, partially hidden by the underbrush, was a backpack. It looked worn and out of place, and Ethan's heart raced as he realized it could belong to one of the men. "Max, stay close," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. He knelt down to examine the backpack, his hands shaking slightly. It was unzipped, and he could see a few items spilling out: clothes, a flashlight, and something that looked like a map. Ethan's curiosity got the better of him. He reached for the map, unfolding it carefully. As he studied it, his heart raced. It was a map of the area, but there were markings on it, X's and circles drawn in red ink. It looked like a plan, and Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. "What are you up to?" he murmured to himself, glancing around the clearing. He felt a surge of urgency. This could be important evidence for the police. Just then, a rustling sound broke the silence, and Ethan's heart dropped. He turned to see a figure emerging from the trees, the second man from the cabin, his expression wild and desperate. "Hey, what are you doing with that?" the man shouted, his voice filled with anger. Ethan's heart raced as he scrambled to his feet, clutching the map tightly. "Get away from me," he yelled, backing away as Max stood protectively in front of him, barking fiercely. "Calm down, kid. I'm not here to hurt you," the man shouted, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. I just want my stuff back. Ethan felt a surge of fear, but he also felt a flicker of bravery. You're lying. You were in that cabin. You're one of the bad guys, he shouted, his voice trembling but resolute. Listen, I'm not with them. I just got caught up in something I didn't understand. The man pleaded, desperation in his eyes. I just want to get out of here. Ethan's mind raced. Could he trust this man? He glanced at Max, who stood firm, ready to protect him. Why should I believe you? Ethan demanded, his voice steady. Because I'm not like them. I didn't want any part of this. I just want to go home. The man insisted, his voice rising in urgency. Ethan felt torn. He wanted to believe the man, but the fear of what he had witnessed loomed large. What if you're lying? He asked, his voice trembling. I'm not. I swear. Just let me go, and I'll leave you alone. The man pleaded, his eyes wide with fear. Just then, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. The man's expression shifted from desperation to panic. No, please don't call them. I'll get in trouble. I just want to go home, he shouted, his voice rising in urgency. Ethan felt a surge of empathy for the man, but the fear of the unknown loomed large. What do we do? He asked, his voice trembling. Stay back, Ethan shouted, stepping protectively in front of Max. We're calling the police. As the sirens grew closer, the man's expression shifted from desperation to panic. No, please don't. I'll do anything. Just help me, he pleaded, his voice rising in urgency. Ethan's heart raced as he watched the man's fear unfold. He felt a mix of compassion and fear, torn between wanting to help and the instinct to protect himself and his mother. Just then, the police cars pulled up, lights flashing as officers stepped out, ready to assess the situation. Officer Daniels approached, her expression serious as she took in the scene. What's going on here? She asked, her eyes scanning the area. This man was in the woods. He said he got lost, but I don't know if we can trust him, Ethan exclaimed, his voice filled with urgency. Officer Daniels stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. Sir, I need you to step back and keep your hands where I can see them, she instructed, her voice steady. The man raised his hands, his eyes wide with fear. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need help, he pleaded, desperation flooding his voice. Ethan, stay close to me, Sarah said, her voice steady as she moved to stand beside her son. Officer Daniels approached the man cautiously, her eyes narrowed. What's your name? She asked, her tone firm. Jake. I swear, I'm not with those guys. I just got lost, he insisted, his voice trembling. Where did you come from? Officer Daniels pressed, her gaze unwavering. I was just passing through the woods. I didn't mean to get caught up in anything. Please, I just want to go home, Jake pleaded, his eyes darting between the officers and Ethan. Ethan felt a surge of empathy for the man, but the fear of the unknown loomed large. He glanced at Max, who remained alert, ready to protect him. Mom, what should we do? Ethan asked, his voice trembling. We need to let the police handle this, Ethan. They'll figure out what's going on, Sarah replied, her voice steady. As the officers continued to question Jake, Ethan felt a mix of emotions swirling within him. He wanted to help, but he also felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He glanced at Max, who remained alert, ready to protect him. After a few tense moments, Officer Daniels turned to Ethan and Sarah. We're going to take this man into custody for questioning. We need to make sure he's not involved in anything illegal, she said, her tone firm. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you, he said, his voice trembling. I just wanted to keep everyone safe. As the officers led Jake away, Ethan felt a mix of emotions swirling within him. He had faced danger, and he had done everything he could to protect his family and his town. With Max by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the night wore on, Ethan and Sarah returned to their home, the weight of the evening's events settling over them. They sat on the porch, Max lying at their feet, a comforting presence amidst the uncertainty. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think we did everything we could, Ethan. You were brave, and you helped keep our town safe," Sarah replied, her voice steady. Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. He had faced danger, and he had done everything he could to protect his family and his town. With Max by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they sat in the quiet of the night, Ethan felt a sense of hope. He knew that he and Max would always be there for each other, ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they were a team, and nothing could break the bond they shared. The following days in Maplewood were filled with a sense of cautious optimism. The police had apprehended one of the men, and the community rallied together, grateful for the bravery of Ethan and Max. The town held a meeting to discuss safety measures, and Ethan felt a swell of pride as he listened to the adults talk about how important it was to look out for one another. Ethan and his friends were hailed as heroes at school, their story spreading like wildfire. Teachers praised them for their courage, and the principal even announced a special assembly to recognize their bravery. Ethan felt a mix of embarrassment and pride as his classmates clapped and cheered for him and Max. He had never imagined that a day spent exploring the woods would lead to such recognition. "Ethan, you're like a real-life superhero," his friend Jake exclaimed, his eyes wide with admiration. "Yeah, and Max is your sidekick," another friend chimed in, grinning. Ethan laughed, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I couldn't have done it without Max," he replied, scratching behind the dog's ears. Max wagged his tail, basking in the attention. As the days turned into weeks, the police continued their investigation, and the community worked together to ensure everyone felt safe. Ethan often joined his friends in the park, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the woods still held secrets. He and Max would occasionally venture to the edge of the trees, but they never went deep into the woods again. The thrill of adventure had been replaced by a cautious respect for the unknown. One afternoon, as Ethan and Max played fetch in the backyard, Sarah called out to him. "Ethan, can you come here for a minute?" Ethan dropped the ball and ran to the porch, where his mother stood with a serious expression. "The police just called. They found something in the woods that might be connected to the men," she said, her voice steady. "What did they find?" Ethan asked, his heart racing. "They discovered a stash of items hidden in a cave not far from where you saw the men. They think it might be related to some illegal activities," Sarah explained. "They want to know if you'd be willing to help them identify anything." Ethan felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Of course, I want to help," he exclaimed, glancing at Max, who seemed to sense his eagerness. "Okay, but remember to be careful. We'll go together," Sarah said, her tone firm but supportive. A short while later, they arrived at the police station, where Officer Daniels greeted them with a warm smile. "Thanks for coming, Ethan. We really appreciate your help," she said, leading them to a small room filled with evidence bags. Ethan's heart raced as he entered the room. Inside were various items, clothing, tools, and even a few pieces of electronics. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice steady. "We'd like you to look through these items and see if anything looks familiar," Officer Daniels explained. "We want to make sure we have everything connected to the men you saw." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of responsibility wash over him. He began to sift through the items, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he examined each piece, he felt a mix of determination and anxiety. He wanted to help, but he also felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. After a few minutes of searching, Ethan spotted something that made his heart skip a beat, a red bandana with a distinctive pattern. He recognized it immediately. "I saw this. One of the men was wearing a bandana just like this," he exclaimed, holding it up for Officer Daniels to see. "Great job, Ethan. This is very helpful," Officer Daniels said, taking the bandana and placing it in an evidence bag. "Anything else?" Ethan continued to search, his heart racing as he focused on each item. He spotted a small backpack that looked familiar. "Wait, I think I saw this backpack in the woods," he said, pointing to it. It was near the cabin. Officer Daniels nodded, her expression serious. "That's important information. We'll make sure to investigate further." As they continued to search, Ethan felt a sense of purpose. He was helping to keep his town safe, and he was proud of the role he was playing. After a thorough examination, Officer Daniels thanked him for his help. "You've done a great job, Ethan. We'll keep you updated on what we find," she said, her tone appreciative. On the way home, Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment. He had faced danger, helped catch one of the men, and now he was contributing to the investigation. He glanced at Max, who trotted beside him, his tail wagging happily. "We did good today, didn't we, boy?" Ethan said, scratching behind Max's ears. That evening, as they settled in for dinner, Ethan shared the day's events with his parents. "I can't believe I found the bandana. I hope it helps the police catch the rest of the men," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "I'm proud of you, Ethan," Mark said, his expression warm. "You've shown a lot of bravery and responsibility." After dinner, Ethan and Max curled up on the couch, watching a movie together. As the credits rolled, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. The danger that had once loomed over Maplewood was slowly fading, and he felt grateful for the support of his family and friends. The next day, Ethan received a call from Officer Daniels. "Ethan, I wanted to let you know that we've made some progress in the investigation," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Thanks to your help, we were able to connect the items you identified to a larger operation. We're working to apprehend the remaining suspects." Ethan's heart raced with excitement. "That's amazing. I'm so glad I could help," he exclaimed. "Your bravery has made a real difference, Ethan." "We appreciate everything you've done," Officer Daniels said. "We'll keep you updated as we continue our investigation." As the days passed, the police continued their work, and the community began to heal. The fear that had gripped Maplewood slowly dissipated, replaced by a renewed sense of safety and unity. Ethan felt proud to be part of that change. One sunny Saturday, the town organized a community picnic to celebrate their resilience and to thank the police for their hard work. Ethan and his family attended, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter, music, and the delicious smell of food. As they enjoyed the festivities, Ethan spotted Officer Daniels and Officer Ramirez chatting with a group of residents. He approached them, feeling a sense of gratitude. "Thank you for everything you've done," he said, his voice sincere. Officer Daniels smiled warmly. "Thank you, Ethan. You played a crucial role in keeping this town safe. We couldn't have done it without your help." Ethan felt a swell of pride as he glanced at Max, who was happily wagging his tail, enjoying the attention from the other picnic goers. "I just wanted to help," he replied, his voice steady. As the day wore on, Ethan participated in games with his friends, and they shared stories of bravery and adventure. The sense of community was palpable. and Ethan felt grateful to be part of such a supportive town. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the picnic, Ethan's heart swelled with hope. He had faced danger, but he had also discovered the strength of his community and the power of friendship. With Max by his side, he felt ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. That evening, as they returned home, Ethan reflected on the events of the past few weeks. He had learned valuable lessons about bravery, responsibility, and the importance of standing up for what was right. He knew that he and Max would always be there for each other, ready to face whatever came their way. As they settled in for the night, Ethan hugged Max tightly, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. "We did it, buddy. We kept everyone safe," he whispered, his heart full of gratitude. Max wagged his tail, resting his head on Ethan's lap, a comforting presence in the quiet of the night. Together, they drifted off to sleep, knowing that they had faced their fears and emerged stronger, ready for whatever adventures awaited them in the future. As the weeks turned into months, life in Maplewood gradually returned to normal. The police had successfully apprehended the remaining suspects involved in the illegal activities, and the community breathed a collective sigh of relief. The woods, once a source of fear, became a place of adventure and exploration again, but with a newfound respect for the mysteries they held. Ethan and Max resumed their daily routines, often exploring the woods together. But they did so with a sense of caution. They had learned the importance of being aware of their surroundings and looking out for one another. The bond between Ethan and Max grew stronger with each adventure, their friendship deepening as they faced challenges together. One sunny Saturday morning, Ethan woke up with a sense of excitement. Today was the annual Maplewood Fall Festival, a beloved tradition that brought the entire town together for a day of fun, food, and festivities. Ethan had been looking forward to this day for weeks, eager to enjoy the games, rides, and delicious treats. "Are you ready for the festival, buddy?" Ethan asked, scratching Max behind the ears as the dog wagged his tail enthusiastically. Max seemed to sense Ethan's excitement, bouncing around the living room as if he could hardly contain himself. After breakfast, Ethan and his parents headed to the town square, where colorful banners fluttered in the breeze and the sounds of laughter and music filled the air. The square was bustling with activity. Booths lined the streets, offering everything from homemade crafts to delicious baked goods. Children ran around, their faces painted with bright colors, while the smell of caramel apples and popcorn wafted through the air. Ethan's eyes lit up as he spotted the games area, where kids were competing for prizes. "Can we go check out the games first?" he asked, tugging at his mother's hand. "Of course. Let's see what they have," Sarah replied, smiling at her son's enthusiasm. As they made their way through the crowd, Ethan felt a sense of joy wash over him. The festival was a celebration of community, resilience, and the spirit of togetherness. He spotted his friends Jake and Lily, who waved excitedly as they approached. "Ethan, over here," Jake called, running up to him. "Are you ready to win some prizes?" "Absolutely," Ethan replied, his heart racing with excitement. "Let's go." The group spent the morning playing games, winning small prizes, and enjoying the festive atmosphere. Ethan felt a sense of normalcy returning to his life, a welcome change after the events of the past few months. He and Max participated in a dog agility course, where Max showcased his skills, weaving through obstacles and jumping over hurdles. The crowd cheered, and Ethan beamed with pride as Max completed the course with ease. After the agility course, they took a break to enjoy some snacks. Ethan munched on a caramel apple while Max happily devoured a dog-friendly treat from a nearby booth. "You did great out there, buddy," Ethan praised, patting Max on the head. As the afternoon wore on, The festival featured a talent show, and Ethan's friends encouraged him to participate. "You should show everyone your magic tricks," Lily urged, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Ethan hesitated, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. He had been practicing some new tricks, but performing in front of a crowd made him anxious. "What if I mess up?" he asked, biting his lip. "Just remember what you did when you faced those men in the woods. You were brave then, and you can be brave now," Jake encouraged, giving him a supportive nudge. Taking a deep breath, Ethan nodded. "Okay, I'll do it," he said, determination flooding his voice. With Max by his side, he felt ready to face the challenge. When it was his turn, Ethan stepped onto the stage, the bright lights shining down on him. The crowd cheered, and he felt a rush of adrenaline. He took a moment to gather his thoughts, glancing at Max, who sat patiently at the edge of the stage, his tail wagging. "Hi, everyone. My name is Ethan, and this is my dog, Max," he said, his voice steady. "Today, I'm going to show you some magic tricks." As he performed his tricks, Ethan felt the nerves begin to fade. The audience laughed and clapped, and he could see his friends cheering him on from the front row. With each successful trick, his confidence grew, and he felt a sense of joy wash over him. When he finished, the crowd erupted in applause, and Ethan beamed with pride. He took a bow, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "Thank you, everyone," he said, grinning from ear to ear. After the talent show, Ethan rejoined his friends, who were all smiles. "You were amazing," Lily exclaimed, her eyes wide with admiration. "Yeah, you totally nailed it," Jake added, giving Ethan a high five. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him. "Thanks, guys. I couldn't have done it without your support," he replied, his heart full. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the festival, Ethan and his friends gathered around a bonfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Laughter filled the air, and Ethan felt a sense of belonging wash over him. The fear that had once gripped him was replaced by a sense of community and friendship. Later that evening, as the festival came to a close, Ethan and his family made their way home, the sounds of laughter and music fading into the distance. Max trotted happily beside them, his tail wagging as he soaked in the joy of the day. "Today was awesome," Ethan exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement. "I can't believe I performed in front of everyone." "You were fantastic, Ethan. I'm so proud of you," Sarah said, her eyes shining with pride. Mark nodded in agreement. "You showed a lot of courage today, just like you did when you faced those men in the woods. You've grown so much." Ethan felt a swell of gratitude for his parents' support. "Thanks, Mom and Dad. I couldn't have done it without you," he replied, his heart full. As they settled in for the night, Ethan reflected on the journey he had taken over the past few months. He had faced fear, discovered bravery within himself, and learned the importance of community. With Max by his side, he felt ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. As he drifted off to sleep, Ethan smiled, knowing that he had not only kept his town safe but had also found his place within it. Together with Max, he was ready for new adventures, new challenges, and a future filled with hope and possibility. Thanks for joining us on this journey with our furry champions. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story, don't forget to subscribe to Furry Champions. Hit that like button and share with friends to spread the love for our furry friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, celebrate the amazing bond between humans and animals. See you in the next video.